Hello, my friends. It's Indiana Holmes for another night of story time. And we are continuing with A.A. Milne's The Red House Mystery. Tonight, we start with chapter 13 The Open Window. Anthony's first thought was that Kaylee had hidden something, perhaps, which he had found by the body, but that was absurd. In the time at his disposal, he could have done no more than put it away in a drawer, where it would be much more open to discovery by Anthony than if he had kept it in his pocket. In any case, he would have removed it by this time, and hidden it somewhere more secret. Besides, why in this case bother about shutting the door? Bill pulled an open drawer in the chest and looked inside. "Is it any good going through these, do you think?" he asked. Anthony looked over his shoulder. "Why did he keep clothes here at all?" he asked. "Did he ever change down here?" "My dear Tony, he had more clothes than anybody in the world. He just kept them here in case they might be useful, I expect. When you and I go from London to the country, we carry our clothes about with us. Mark never did. In his flat in London, he had everything all over again, which he has here. It was a hobby with him, collecting clothes. If he'd had half a dozen houses, they would all have been full of a complete gentleman's town and country outfit." "I see. Of course, it might be useful sometimes, when he was busy in the next room, not to have to go upstairs for a handkerchief or a more comfortable coat." "I see, yes." He was walking round the room as he answered, and he lifted the top of the linen basket, which stood near the wash basin, and glanced in. "He seems to have come in here for a collar lately." Bill peered in. There was one collar at the bottom of the basket. "Yes, I dare say he would," he agreed. If he suddenly found that the one he was wearing was uncomfortable or a little bit dirty or something, he was very finicky. Anthony leaned over and picked it out. "It must have been uncomfortable this time," he said after examining it carefully. "It couldn't very well be cleaner." He dropped it back in. "Anyway, he did come in here sometimes." "Oh, yes, rather." "Yes, but what did Kaylee come in for so secretly?" "What did he want to shut the door for?" said Bill. "That's what I don't understand. You couldn't have seen him anyhow." "No. So it follows that I might have heard him. He was going to do something which he didn't want me to hear." "By Jove, that's it," said Bill eagerly. "Yes, but what?" Bill frowned hopefully to himself, but no inspiration came. "Well, let's have some air anyway," he said at last, exhausted by the effort, and he went to the window, opened it, and looked out. Then, struck by an idea, he turned back to Anthony and said, "Do you think I had better go up to the pond to make sure they're still at it? Because—" He broke off suddenly at the sight of Anthony's face. "Oh, idiot, idiot," Anthony cried. "Oh, most super excellent of Watsons. Oh, you lamb, you blessing. Oh, Gillingham, you incomparable ass." "What on earth?" The window, Anthony cried, pointing at it. Bill turned back to the window, expecting it to say something. As it said nothing, he looked at Anthony again. "He was opening the window," cried Anthony. "Who?" "Kaylee, of course." Very gravely and slowly, he expounded. "He came in here in order to open the window. He shut the window so that I shouldn't hear him open the window. He opened the window, and I came in here and I found the window open. I said, 'This window is open.' My amazing powers of analysis tell me that the murder must have escaped by this window." "Oh," said Kaylee, raising his eyebrows. "Well," said he, "I suppose you must be right." Said I proudly, "I am." "For the window is open," I said. "Oh, you incomparable ass." He understood now. It explained so much that had been puzzling him. He tried to put himself in Kaylee's place. Kaylee, when Antony had first discovered him hammering at the door and crying, "Let me in." Whatever had happened inside the office, whoever had killed Robert, Kaylee knew all about it and knew that Mark was not inside and had not escaped by the window. But it was necessary to Kaylee's plans, to Mark's plans, if they were acting in concert, that he should have thought so to have escaped. At some time then, while he was hammering the key in his pocket at the locked door, he must suddenly have remembered with what a shock that a mistake had been made. A window had not been left open. Probably it would just have been a horrible doubt at first. Was the office window open? Surely it was open. Was it? Would he have time now to unlock the door, slip in, open the French windows, and slip out again? No. At any moment the servants might come. It was too risky, fatal, if he were discovered. But servants were stupid. He could get the windows safely open while they were crowding round the body. They wouldn't notice. He could do it somehow. And then Antony's sudden appearance. Here was a complication, and Antony suggesting that they should try the window. Why, the window was just what he wanted to avoid. No wonder he had seemed dazed at first. Ah, and here at last was the explanation why they had gone the longest way round and yet run. It was Kaylee's only chance of getting a start on Antony, of getting the windows first, of working them open somehow before Antony caught him up. Even if that were impossible, he must get there first, just to make sure. Perhaps they were open. He must get away from Antony and see. And if they were shut, hopelessly shut, then he must have a moment to himself, a moment in which he was to think of some other plan and avoid the ruin which seemed so suddenly to be threatening. So he had run, but Antony had kept up with him. They had broken in the window together and gone into the office, but Kaylee was not done yet. There was a dressing room window, but quietly. Antony mustn't hear. And Antony didn't hear. Indeed, he had played up to Kaylee splendidly. Not only had he called attention to the window open, but he had carefully explained to Kaylee why Mark had chosen this particular window in preference to the office window. And Kaylee had agreed that probably that was the reason. How he must have chuckled to himself. But he was still a little afraid that Antony would examine the shrubbery. Why? Obviously because there was no trace of anyone having broken through the shrubbery. No doubt Kaylee had provided the necessary traces since and had helped the inspector find them. He had even gone so far as footmarks in Mark's shoes. But the ground was very hard. Perhaps footmarks were not necessary. Antony smiled as he thought of the big Kaylee trying to squeeze into the dapper little Mark's shoes. Kaylee must have been glad that footmarks were not necessary. No, the open window was enough. The open window and the broken twig or two, but quietly. Antony mustn't hear, and Antony had not heard, but he had seen a shadow on the wall. They were outside on the lawn again now, Bill and Antony, and Bill was listening open-mouthed to his friend's theory of yesterday's happenings. It fitted in. It explained things, but it did not get them any further. It only gave them another mystery to solve. "What's that?" said Antony. "Mark. Where's Mark? If he never went into the office at all, then where is he now?" "I don't say that he never went into the office. In fact, he must have gone. Elise heard him. He stopped, and repeatedly, slowly, she heard him. At least she says she did. But if he was there, he came out again by the door." "Well, but where does that lead you?" "Where it led Mark. The passage." "Do you mean that he's been hiding there all the time?" Anthony was silent until Bill had repeated this question, and then, with an effort, he came out of his thoughts and answered him. I don't know, but look here. Here is a possible explanation. I don't know if it is the right one. I don't know. Bill, I'm rather frightened. Frightened of what may have happened, of what may be going on, and what may go on to happen. However, here is an explanation. See if you can find any fault with it. With his legs stretched out and his hands deep in his pockets, he lay back on the garden seat, looking up to the blue summer sky above him. And just as if he saw up there the events of yesterday being enacted over again, he described them slowly to Bill as they happened. We'll begin at the moment when Mark shoots Robert. Call it an accident. Probably it was. Mark would say it was anyhow. He is in a panic, naturally, but he doesn't lock the door and run away. For one thing, the key is on the outside of the door. For another, he is not quite such a fool as that. But he is in a horrible position. He is known to be on bad terms with his brother. He has just uttered some foolish threat to him, which may possibly have been overheard. What is he to do? He does the natural thing, the thing which Mark would always do in such circumstances. He consults Cayley, the invaluable, inevitable Cayley. Cayley is just outside. Cayley must have heard the shot. Cayley will tell him what to do. He opens the door just as Cayley is coming to see what is the matter. He explains rapidly. What's to be done? Kay? What's to be done? Is it an accident? I swear it was an accident. He threatened me. He would have shot me if I hadn't. Think of something quick. Cayley has a thought of something. Leave it to me, he says. You clear out altogether. I shot him, if you like. I'll do the explaining. Get away. Hide. Nobody saw you go in. Into the passage, quick. I'll come to you there as soon as I can. Good, Cayley. Faithful Cayley. Mark's courage comes back. Cayley will explain all right. Cayley will tell the servants that it was an accident. He will ring up the police. Nobody will suspect Cayley. Cayley has no quarrel with Robert. And then Cayley will come into the passage and tell him that it is all right. And Mark will go out by the other end and saunter slowly back to the house. He will be told the news by one of the servants. Robert accidentally shot. Good heavens! So, greatly reassured, Mark goes into the library, and Cayley goes to the door of the office and locks it. And then he bangs on the door and shouts, "Let me in!" Anthony was silent. Bill looked at him and shook his head. "Yes, Tony, but that doesn't make sense. What's the point of Cayley behaving like that?" Anthony shrugged his shoulders without answering. "And what has happened to Mark since?" Anthony again shrugged his shoulders. "Well, the sooner we go into that passage, the better," said Bill. "You're ready to go?" "Quite," said Bill, surprised. "You're quite ready for what we may find? You're being dashed mysterious, old boy." "I know I am." He gave a little laugh and went on. "Perhaps I'm being an ass, just a melodramatic ass. Well, I hope I am." He looked at his watch. "It's safe, is it?" "They're still busy at the pond. We'd better make certain." "Could you be a sleuth hound, Bill, one of those that travel on their stomachs very noiselessly? I mean, could you get near enough to the pond to make sure that Cayley is still there without letting him see you?" "Rather." He got up eagerly. "You wait." Anthony's head shot up suddenly. "Why, that was what Mark said," he cried. "Mark?" "Yes, what Elise heard him say." "Oh, that. Yes, I suppose she couldn't have made up a mistake, Bill. She did hear him." "She couldn't have mistaken his voice, if that's what you mean." "Oh, Mark had an extraordinary characteristic voice." "Oh, rather high-pitched, you know. And, well, one can't explain it, but yes. Well, rather like this, you know, or even more so if anything." He rattled these words off in Mark's rather monotonous, high-pitched voice, and then laughed and added in his natural voice, "I say, that really was rather good." Anthony nodded quickly. That was like it? He said. Exactly. Yes, he got up and squeezed Bill's arm. Well, just go and see about Kaylee, and then we'll get moving. I shall be in the library. Right. Bill nodded and walked off in that direction of the pond. This was a glorious amount of fun. This was life. The immediate program could hardly be bettered. First of all was going to stalk Kaylee. There was a little corpse above the level of the pond. A little, not corpse, but copsey. A little copsey above the level of the pond. And about 100 yards away from it, he would come from the back, creep cautiously through it, taking care that no twigs cracked, and then, drawing himself on his stomach to the edge, peer down upon the scene below him. People were always doing that sort of thing in books, and he had been filled with hopeless envy of them. Well, now he was actually going to do it himself. What fun! And then, when he had got back unobserved to the house and reported to Antony, they were going to explore the secret passage. Again, what fun! Unfortunately, there seemed to be no chance of buried treasure. But there might be buried clues. Even if you found nothing, you couldn't get away from the fact that a secret passage was a secret passage, and anything might happen in it. But even that wasn't the end of this exciting day. They were going to watch the pond that night. They were going to watch Kaylee under the moonlight, watch him as he threw into silence of the pond. What? The revolver? Well, anyhow, they were going to watch him. What fun! To Anthony, who was older and who realized into what deep waters they were getting, it did not seem fun, but it was amazingly interesting. He saw so much, and yet somehow it was all out of focus. It was like looking at an opal and discovering with every movement of it some new color, some new gleam of light reflected, and yet never really seeing the opal as a whole. He was too near it or too far away. He strained his eyes and he relaxed his eyes. It was no good. His brain could not get a hold of it. But there were moments when he almost had it and then turned away from it. He had seen more of life than Bill, but he had never seen murder before. And this, which was in his mind now, and to which he was afraid of to listen, was not just the hot-blooded killing which any man may come to if he loses control. It was something much more horrible, too horrible to be true. Then let him look again for the truth. He looked again, but it was all out of focus. "I will not look again," he said aloud, as he began to walk towards the house. Not yet, anyway. He would go on collecting facts and impressions. Perhaps the one fact would come along by itself, which would make everything clear. Chapter 14. Mr. Beverly qualifies for the stage. Bill had come back and had reported rather breathlessly that Kaylee was still at the pond. "But I don't think they're getting up much except mud," he said. "I ran most of the way back so as to give us as much time as possible." Antony nodded. "Well, come along then," he said. "The sooner the quicker." They stood in front of a row of sermons. Antony took down the Reverend Theodore Usher's famous volume and felt for the spring. Bill pulled. The shelves swung open towards them. "By Jove," said Bill, "it is a narrow way." There was an opening about a yard square in front of them, which had something of a look of a brick fireplace. A fireplace raised about 2 feet from the ground, but save for one row of bricks in the front. The floor of it was emptiness. Antony took a torch from his pocket and flashed it down into the blackness. "Look," he whispered to the eager Bill. "The steps begin down there, 6 feet down." He flashed his torch again. There was a handhold of iron, a sort of large iron staple, in the bricks in front of them. You swing off from there, said Bill. At least I suppose you do. I wonder how Ruth Norris liked doing it. Kaylee helped her, I should think. It's funny. Shall I go first? Asked Bill, obviously longing to do so. Anthony shook his head with a smile. I think I will, if you don't mind very much, Bill, just in case. In case of what? Well, in case. Bill had to be content with that, but he was too much excited to wonder what Anthony meant. Righto, he said, go on. Well, we'll just make sure we can get back again. First, it really wouldn't be fair on the inspector if we got stuck down here for the rest of our lives. He's got enough to do in finding Mark. But if he has to find you and me as well, we can always get out the other end. Well, we're not certain yet. I think I'd better just go down and back. I promised faithfully not to explore. Right you are. Anthony sat down on the ledge of bricks, swung his feet over, and sat there for a moment, his legs dangling. He flashed his torch into the darkness again, so as to make sure where the steps began. Then he returned to his pocket, seized the staple in front of him, and swung himself down. His feet touched the steps beneath him, and he let go. It's all right, said Bill anxiously. All right. I'll just go down to the bottom of the steps and back. Stay there. The light shone down by his feet. His head began to disappear for a little while, and Bill, craning down his neck to the opening, could still see faint splashes of light and could hear slow, uncertain footsteps. For a little longer, he could fancy that he saw and heard them. Then he was alone. Well, not quite alone. There was a sudden voice in the hall outside. Good Lord, said Bill, turning round with a start. Kaylee! If he was not so quick in thought as Anthony, he was quick enough in action. Thought was not demanded now. Too close to the secret door, safely but noiselessly, to make sure that the books were in the right places, to move away to another row of shelves, so as not to be discovered deep in the badminton or Baedeker, whomever the kind gods should send to his aid. The difficulty was not to decide what to do, but to do all this in 5 seconds or 6. Ah, there you are, said Kaylee from the doorway. Hello, said Bill, in surprise, looking up from the 4th volume of the life and works of Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Have they finished? Finished what? The pond, said Bill, wondering why he was reading Coleridge on such a fine afternoon. Desperately, he tried to think of a good reason, verifying a quotation in argument with Anthony, what would do. But what quotation? Oh, no, they're still at it. Where's Gillingham? The Ancient Mariner. Water, water, everywhere. Or was that something else? And where was Gillingham? Water, water, everywhere. Tony. Oh, he's about somewhere. We're just going down to the village. They aren't finding anything at the pond, are they? No, but they like doing it. Something off their minds when they can say they've done it. Bill, deep in his book, looked up and said, yes, and went back to it again. He was just getting to the place. What's the book? Said Kaylee, coming up to him. Out of the corner of his eye, he glanced at the shelf of sermons as he came. Bill saw the glance and wondered, was there anything there to give away the secret? I was just looking up a quotation, he drawled. Tony and I had a bet about it. You know, that thing about the water everywhere and not a drop to drink? But what on earth, he wondered to himself, were they betting about? Nor any drop to drink, to be accurate? Bill looked up at him in surprise. Then a happy smile came to his face. Quite sure, he said. Of course. Then you saved me a lot of trouble. That's what the bet was about. He closed the book with a slam and put it back on the shelf and began to feel for his pipe and tobacco. I was a fool to bet with Tony, he added. He always knows that sort of thing. So far, so good. But here was Kaylee still in the library, and there was Anthony, all unsuspecting in the passage. When Anthony came back, he would not be surprised to find the door closed, because the whole object of his going had been to see if he could open it easily from the inside. At any moment, then, the bookshelf might swing back and show Antony's head in the gap. A nice surprise for Cayley. "Come with us," he said casually, as he struck a match. He pulled vigorously at the flame as he waited for the answer, hoping to hide his anxiety, for if Cayley assented, he was done. "I've got to go to Stanton." Bill blew out a great cloud of smoke with an exasperation which covered also a heartfelt sigh of relief. "Oh, pity. You're driving, I suppose." "Yes, the car will be here directly." "There's a letter I must write first." He sat down at a writing table and took out a sheet of paper. He was facing the secret door. If it opened, he would see it. At any moment now, it might open. Bill dropped into a chair and thought, Antony must be warned. Obviously, but how? How did one signal to anybody? By code? Morse code? Did Antony know it? Did Bill know it himself? If it came to that, he had picked up a bit in the army. Not enough to send a message, of course, but a message was impossible anyhow. Cayley would hear him tapping it out. It wouldn't do it to send it more than a single letter. What letters did he know? And what letter would convey anything to Antony? He pulled out his pipe, his wandering eyes from Cayley at his desk to the Reverend Theodore Usher in his shelf. What letter? C for Cayley. Would Antony understand? Probably not, but it was just worth trying. What was C? Long, short, long, short? Uppity, itty. Was that right? C? Yes? That was C. He was sure of it. C. Uppity, itty. Hands in his pockets, he got up and wandered across the room, humming vaguely to himself, the picture of a man waiting for another man, as it might be his friend Gillingham, to come in and take him away for a walk or something. He wandered across the books at the back of Cayley and began to tap absent-mindedly on the shelves. As he looked at the titles, umptity-itty, not that it was much like that at first. He couldn't get the rhythm of it. Umpity-itty, that was better. He was back at Samuel Taylor Coleridge now. Antony would begin to hear him soon. Umpity-itty, just the aimless tapping of a man who is wondering what book he will take out with him to read on the lawn. Would Antony hear? One always heard the man in the next flat knocking out his pipe. Would Antony understand? Umpity, C for Cayley. Antony, Cayley is here. For God's sake, wait. Good Lord, sermons, said Bill, with a loud laugh. Umpity. Ever read 'em, Cayley? What? Cayley looked up suddenly. Bill's back moved slowly along, his fingers beating a tattoo on the shelves as he walked. No, said Cayley with a little laugh. It was an awkward, uncomfortable little laugh, it seemed to Bill. Nor do I. He was past the sermons now, past the secret door, but still tapping the same way. Oh, for God's sake, sit down, burst out Cayley, or go outside if you want to walk about. Bill turned round in astonishment. Hello, what's the matter? Cayley was slightly ashamed of his outburst. Sorry, Bill, he apologized. My nerves are on edge. Your constant tapping and fidgeting about. Tapping? Said Bill with an air of complete surprise. Tapping on the shelves and humming. Sorry, it got on my nerves. My dear old chap, I'm awfully sorry. I'll go out in the hall. It's all right, said Cayley, and went on with his letter. Bill sat down in his armchair again. Had Antony understood? Well, anyhow, there was nothing to do now but wait for Cayley to go. And if you ask me, said Bill to himself, much pleased, I ought to be on stage. That's where I ought to be. The complete actor. A minute or two, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. It was safe now. Antony had guessed. Is the car there? Asked Cayley as he sealed up his letter. Bill strolled into the hall, called back, yes, and he went out to talk to the chauffeur. Cayley joined him, and they stood there for a moment. Hello. said a pleasant voice behind them. They turned around and saw Anthony. Sorry to keeping you waiting, Bill. With a tremendous effort, Bill restrained his feelings and said casually enough that it was all right. Well, I must be off, said Kaylee. You're going down to the village? That's the idea. I wonder if you'd take this letter to the Jallards for me. Of course. Thanks very much. Well, I shall see you later. He nodded and got into the car. As soon as they were alone, Bill turned eagerly to his friend. Well, he said excitedly, come into the library. They went in. Tony sank down into a chair. You must give me a moment, he panted. I've been running. Running? Well, of course. How do you think I got back here? I don't mean you went out the other end? Anthony nodded. I say, did you hear me tapping? I did indeed, Bill. You're a genius. Bill blushed. I knew you'd understand, he said. You guessed it meant Kaylee. I did. It was the least I could do after you had been so brilliant. You must have had a rather exciting time. Exciting? Good Lord! I should think it was. Tell me about it. As modestly as possible, Mr. Beverly explained his qualifications for a life on stage. Good man, said Anthony at the end of it. You are the most perfect Watson that ever lived. Bill, my lad, he went on dramatically, rising and taking Bill's hand in both of his. There is nothing that you and I could not accomplish together if we gave our minds to it. Silly old ass. That's what you always say when I'm being serious. Well, anyway, thanks awfully. You really saved us this time. Were you coming back? Yes, at least I think I was. I was just wondering when I heard you tapping. The fact of the door being shut was rather surprising. Of course, the whole idea was to see if it could be opened easily from the other side, but I felt somehow that you wouldn't have shut it until the last possible moment, until you saw me coming back. Well, then I heard the taps, and I knew it must mean something, so I sat tight. Then, when C began to come along, I said, Ah, Kaylee, by Jove, bright, aren't I? And I simply harried to the other end of the passage for all I was worth, and harried back because I thought you might be getting rather involved in explanations about where I was, and so on. You didn't see Mark, then? No, nor his... No, I didn't see anything. Nor what? Anthony was silent for a minute. I didn't see anything, Bill. Or rather, I did see something. I saw a door in the wall, a cupboard, and it's locked. So if there's anything we want to find, that's where it is. Could Mark be hiding there? I called through the keyhole in a whisper, Mark, are you there? He would have thought it was Kaylee. There was no answer. Well, let's go down and try it. Try it again. We might be able to get to the door and maybe get it open this time. Anthony shook his head. Aren't I going at all? Said Bill in a great disappointment. When Anthony spoke, it was to ask another question. Can Kaylee drive a car? Yes, of course. Why? Then he might easily drop the chauffeur at his lodge and go off to Stanton, or wherever he wanted to on his own. I suppose so, if he wanted to. Yes, Anthony got up. Well, look here. As we said we were going into the village, and as we promised to leave that letter, I almost think we'd better do it. Oh, very well. Jellens. What were you telling me about that? Oh, yes, the widow Norbury. That's right. Kaylee used to be rather keen on the daughter. The letter's for her. Yes, well, let's take it, just to be on the safe side. Am I going to be done out of the secret passage altogether? Asked Bill fretfully. There's nothing to see, really, I promise you. You're very mysterious. What's upset you? You did see something down there, I'm certain of it. I did, and I've told you about it. No, you haven't. You only told me about the door in the wall. That's it, Bill. And it's locked, and I'm frightened of what's behind it. But then we shall never know what's there if we aren't going to look. We shall know tonight, said Anthony, taking Bill's arm and leading him to the hall, when we watch our friend Kaylee dropping it into the pond. Chapter 15. Mrs. Norbury Confides in Dear Mr. Gillingham. They left the road and took the path across the fields which sloped gently downwards towards Jallands. Anthony was silent, and since it was difficult to keep up a conversation with a silent man for any length of time, Bill had dropped into silence too, or rather, he hummed to himself, hit at thistles in the grass with his stick, and made uncomfortable noises with his pipe. But he noticed that his companion kept looking back over his shoulder, almost as if he wanted to remember, for a future occasion, the way by which they were coming. Yet there was no difficulty about it, for they remained all the time in view of the in view of the road, and the belt of trees above the long park. The wall which bordered its further side stood out clearly against the sky. Anthony, who had just looked around again, turned back with a smile. "What's the joke?" said Bill, glad of the more social atmosphere. "Cayley didn't see. He didn't see you, did he?" "See what?" "The car going past on the road there." "So that's what you were looking for. You've jolly good eyes, my boy, jolly good eyes. If you recognize the car at this distance after only seeing it twice, well, I have got jolly good eyes. I thought he was going to Stanton. He hoped you'd think so, obviously. Then where is he going?" "The library, probably, to consult our friend Usher." After making quite sure that his friends Beverly and Gillingham really were going to Jallands, as they said. Bill stopped suddenly in the middle of the path. "I say, do you think so?" Anthony shrugged his shoulders. "I shouldn't be surprised. We must be devilishly inconvenient for him, hanging about the house. Any moment he can get when we're definitely somewhere else must be very useful to him." "Useful for what?" "Well, useful for his nerves, if nothing else. We know he's mixed up in this business. We know he's hiding a secret or two, even if he doesn't suspect that we're onto his tracks. He must feel like at any moment we might stumble on something." Bill gave a grunt of assent, and they went slowly on again. "What about tonight?" he said, after a lengthy blow at his pipe. "Try a piece of grass," said Anthony, offering it to Bill. Bill pushed it through the mouthpiece, blew it again, and said, "That's better," and returned the pipe to his pocket. "How are we going to get out without Cayley knowing?" "Well, that wants thinking over. It's going to be difficult. I wish we were sleeping at the inn. Is this Miss Norbury by any chance?" Bill looked up quickly. They were close to Jallands now, an old thatched farmhouse which, after centuries of sleep, had awoken up to the new world, and had forthwith sprouted wings, however, of so discreet a growth that they had not brought with them any obvious change in character, and Jallands, even with a bathroom, was still Jallands. To the outward view, at any rate, inside, it was more clearly Mrs. Norbury's. "Yes, Angela Norbury," murmured Bill. "Not bad looking, is she?" The girl who stood by this little white gate of Jallands was something more than not bad looking. But in this matter, Bill was keeping his superlatives for another. In Bill's eyes, she must be judged and condemned by all that distinguished her from Betty Calladine. To Anthony, unhampered by these standards of comparison, she seemed quite simply beautiful. "Cayley asked us to bring a letter along," explained Bill, when the necessary handshaking and introductions were over. "Here you are. Will you tell him, won't you, how dreadfully sorry I am about what happened and what has happened? It seems so hopeless to say anything, so hopeless even to believe it. If it is true, what we've heard." Bill repeated the outline of the events. "Yes, and Mr. Ablett hasn't been found yet?" She took her head in distress. It still seems to have happened to somebody else, somebody we didn't know at all. Then, with a sudden grave smile, which included both of them, "But you must come and have some tea. It's awfully decent of you," said Bill awkwardly. "But you will, won't you?" said she to Anthony. "Thank you very much." Mrs. Norbury was delighted to see them, as she was delighted to see any man in her house who came up to the necessary standard of eligibility. When her life work was completed and summed up in those beautiful words, "A marriage has been arranged and will shortly take place between Angela, daughter of the late John Norbury," then she would utter a grateful Nunc Dimittis and depart in utter peace to a better world, if heaven insisted, but preferably to her new son-in-law's more dignified establishment, for there was no doubt that eligibility meant not only eligibility as a husband, but it was not as eligibles that the visitors from the Red House were received with such eagerness today, and even in her special smiles for possibles it was instinctive rather than reasoned. All that she wanted at this moment was news of Mark, for she was bringing it off at last, and if the engagement columns of the Morning Post were preceded, as in the case of the obituary columns, by a promontory bulletin, the announcement of yesterday's would have cried triumphantly to the world, or to such part of the world as mattered: a marriage was very nearly been arranged by Mrs. Norbury, and will certainly take place between Angela, only daughter of the late John Norbury, and Mark Ablett of the Red House. And coming across it on his way to the sporting page, Bill would have been surprised, for he had thought that, if anybody, it was Cayley. To the girl, it was neither. She was often amused by her mother's ways, sometimes ashamed of them, sometimes distressed by them. The Mark Ablett affair had seemed to her particularly distressing, for Mark was so obviously in league with her mother against her. Other suitors upon whom her mother had smiled had been embarrassed by that championship. Mark appeared to depend on it as much as on his own attractions. Great though he thought these to be, they went a-wooing together. It was a pleasure to turn to Cayley, that hopeless ineligible. But alas, Cayley had misunderstood her. She could not imagine Cayley in love until she saw it at last, and tried, too late, to stop it. That was 4 days ago. She had not seen him since, and now there was this letter. She dreaded opening it. It was a relief to feel that at least she had an excuse for not doing so while her guests were in the house. Mrs. Norbury recognized at once that Anthony was likely to be the more sympathetic listener, and when tea was over and Bill and Angela had been dispatched to the garden with their promptness and efficiency of the expert, dear Mr. Gillingham found himself on the sofa beside her, listening to many things which were even of greater interest to him than she could possibly have hoped. "It is terrible, terrible," she said, and to suggest that dear Mr. Ablett. Anthony made suitable noises. "You've seen Mr. Ablett for yourself. A kinder and warm-hearted man." Anthony explained that he had not seen Mr. Ablett. "Of course, yes, I was forgetting. But believe me, Mr. Gillingham, you can trust a woman's intuition in these matters. Anthony said that he was for sure of this. Think of my feelings as a mother." Anthony was thinking of Miss Norbury's feelings as a daughter, and wondering if she guessed that her affair were now being discussed with a stranger. What could he do? What, indeed, did he want to do except listen, in the hope of learning. Mark, engaged or about to be engaged, had at the time no bearing on the events of yesterday. What, for instance, would Mrs. Norbury have thought of her brother Robert, that family skeleton? Was this another reason for wanting brother Robert out of the way? I never liked him. Never. Never liked, said Anthony, bewildered. The cousin of his Mr. Cayley? Oh, I ask you, Mr. Gillingham, I am the sort of woman to trust with my little girl to a man who would go about shooting his only brother? I'm sure you wouldn't, Mrs. Norbury. If there has been any shooting done, it has been done by somebody else. Anthony looked at her inquiringly. I never liked him, said Mrs. Norbury firmly. Never. However, thought Anthony to himself, that didn't quite prove that Cayley was a murderer. How did Miss Norbury get on with him? He asked cautiously. There was nothing in it at all, said Mrs. Norbury, mother emphatically. Nothing, I would say so to anybody. Oh, I beg your pardon. I never meant. Nothing can say that for dear Angela with perfect confidence whether he made advances. She broke off with a shrug of her plump shoulders. Anthony waited eagerly. Naturally, they met. Possibly he might have. I don't know. But my duty as a mother was clear, Mr. Gillingham. Mr. Gillingham made an encouraging noise. I told him quite frankly that, how shall I put it, that he was trespassing. Tactfully, of course, but frankly. You mean, said Anthony, trying to speak calmly, that you told him that Mr. Ablett and your daughter, Mr. Norbury, Mrs. Norbury nodded several times. Exactly, Mr. Gillingham. I had my duty as a mother. I'm sure, Mrs. Norbury, that nothing would keep you from doing your duty. But it must have been disagreeable, particularly if you weren't quite sure. He was attracted, Mr. Gillingham. Obviously attracted. Who would not be? Said Anthony, with a charming smile. It must have been something of a shock to him. It was just that which made me so glad that I had spoken. I saw at once that I had not spoken a moment too soon. There must have been a certain awkwardness about the next meeting, suggested Anthony. Naturally, he has not been here since. No doubt they would have been bound to meet up at the Red House sooner or later. Oh, this was only quite lately? Last week, Mr. Gillingham. I spoke just last week, just in time. Ah, said Anthony under his breath. He had been waiting for it. He would have liked now to have gone away so that he might have thought over the new situation by himself, or perhaps preferably to have changed partners for a little while with Bill. Miss Norbury would hardly be ready to confide in a stranger with the readiness of a mother. But he might have learned something by listening to her. For which of them had she the greater feeling, Cayley or Mark? Was she really prepared to marry Mark? Did she love him, or the other, or neither? Mrs. Norbury was only a trustworthy witness in regard to her own actions and thoughts. He had learned all that was necessary of those, and only the daughter now had anything left to tell him. But Mrs. Norbury was still talking. Girls are so foolish, Mr. Gillingham, she was saying. It was fortunate that they have mothers to guide them. It was so obvious to me from the beginning that dear Mr. Ablett was just the husband for my little girl. You never knew him? Anthony said again that he had not seen Mr. Ablett. Such a gentleman, so nice looking, in his artistic way, a regular Velasquez, I should say. Van Dyck? Angela would have it that she could never marry a man with a beard, as if that mattered, when she broke off and Anthony finished her sentence for her. The Red House is certainly charming," he said. "Charming, quite charming. And it is not as if Mr. Ablett's appearance were in any way undistinguished. Quite the contrary. I am sure you agree with me." Antony said that he had never heard or never had the pleasure of seeing Mr. Ablett. Yes, and quite at the center of the library, an artistic world, so desirable in every place. She gave a deep sigh and communed with herself for a little while. Antony was about to snatch the opportunity of leaving when Mrs. Norbury began again. "And then there was the scapegrace brother of his. He was perfectly frank with me, Mr. Gillingham. He would be. He told me of his brother, and told me I told him that I was quite certain it would make no difference to my daughter's feelings for him. After all, the brother was in Australia." "When was this? Yesterday?" Antony felt that, if Mark had only mentioned it after his brother's announcement of personal call at the Red House, this perfect frankness had a good deal of wisdom behind it. It couldn't have been yesterday, Mr. Gillingham. Yesterday," he shuddered. "Or yesterday," she shuddered and shook her head. "I thought perhaps he had been down here in the morning." "Oh, no. There is such a thing, Mr. Gillingham, as being too devoted a lover. Not in the morning, no. We both agreed that dear Angela—" "Oh, no. No. The day before yesterday, when he happened to drop in about tea, it occurred to Antony that Mrs. Norbury had come a long way from her opening statement that Mark and Miss Norbury were practically engaged. She was now admitting that dear Angela was not to be rushed, and that dear Angela had, indeed, no heart for the match at all. The day before yesterday, as it happened, dear Angela was out. Not that it mattered. It was driving to Middleston. He hardly had time for a cup of tea, so that even if she had been in—" Antony nodded absently. This was something new. Why did Mark go to Middleton the day before yesterday? But after all, why shouldn't he? 100 reasons unconnected with the death of Robert might have taken him there. He got up to go. He wanted to be alone at least with Bill. Mrs. Norbury had given him many things to think over, but the great outstanding fact which had emerged about this, that Cayley had reason to hate Mark. Mrs. Norbury had given him the reason. To hate? Well, to be jealous anyhow. But that was enough. "You see," he said to Bill as they walked back, "we know that Cayley is perjuring himself and risking himself over this business, and that it must be for one of two reasons, either to save Mark or to endanger him. That is to say, he is either wholeheartedly for him or wholeheartedly against him. Well, now we know that he is against him, definitely against him." "But I say, protested Bill, "one doesn't necessarily try to ruin one's rival in love." "Doesn't one?" said Antony, turning to him with a smile. Bill blushed. "Well, of course, one never knows. But I mean, you mightn't try to ruin him, Bill, but you wouldn't perjure yourself in order to get him out of trouble or to get him into trouble of his own making." "Lord, no. So the two alternatives, the other is more likely. Of these two alternatives, the other is more likely." They had come to the gate, into the last field which divided them from the road, and having gone through it, they turned round and leaned against it, resting for a moment and looking down at the house which they had left. "Jolly little place, isn't it?" said Bill. "Very, but rather mysterious." "In what way?" "Well, where's the front door?" "The front door? Why, you've just come out of it." "But isn't there a drive or a road or anything?" Bill laughed. "No, that's the beauty of it to some people. And that's why it's so cheap, and why the Norburys can afford it, I expect. They're not too well off. But what about luggage and tradesmen and that kind of thing?" "Oh, there's a cart track. but motor cars can't come any nearer than the road. He turned around and pointed up there. So the weekend millionaire people don't take it? At least they'd have to build a road and a garage and all sort of rest of it if they did. I see, said Anthony carelessly, and they turned round and continued their walk up the road. But later, he remembered this casual conversation at the gate and saw the importance of it. And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 15. Okay, tomorrow night we will once again read another 3 chapters of the Red House Mystery. I hope you're enjoying this story. It is a lot of banter back and forth, a lot of chattiness trying to discover the who's, the what's, the whens, the whys, and the hows. But if you like mysteries, I think this one's pretty good. We really don't have any idea of who killed and who survived. We know who survived, but again, we don't know if Mark survived. We know Robert was killed, but by whom, we do not know as of yet. All right, my friends, this has been Indiana Homes. Love to you all. Good night.
Please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications button. Thank you very much.